All right. So I think I'm going to take a couple questions here and take a break, and then we can come back and talk about the Nephilim. Unless you wanted to go right for your coffee. I bet you have a lot of questions about sons of God now. Or maybe you need some coffee to perk you up to deal with it. Angie, you had a comment from before, or you?
I had a comment.
Yes.
Is in relation to men
Yes.
being different after having children. There were studies, and there have been studies to show that both men and women tend to be less risky after having children,
Yes.
are less involved in crime.
Yes.
In fact, when you were talking, I looked up one study, and it says that women tend to be less, they are 50 times less likely to be involved in crime after becoming parent, and men 20% less likely.
Yeah.
I remember one of my daughters making a comment that, I just drive slow, and I'm thinking to myself, between myself and my husband, I'm the more aggressive driver.
Yeah.
But they don't see that, especially when they're in the car. So, one time I had her in the car and I was driving, and she was surprised, and I said, well, I'm more conscious when I have you, especially now that she has her license. So I might do some things, and I said, don't do that, So I think after, and I guess also after experiencing the miracle of conception, and it makes you think about God and His wonders and His greatness. There's a greater consciousness, I believe, in who God is.
Yeah. So kids change you. I was trying to say all of that, but not as well. But yes, you're right. There is for those of us who have had the experience, your life changes. And so maybe there's something in that. But as I say, we can reflect some more on Enoch. Any other questions? Yes, Devon, go ahead.
I know that in the past, well, other times in scripture at least, we assume that angels are supposed to be very beautiful and glorious and beings of light.
Yeah.
And yet it says these angels saw that, women were beautiful.
Yeah.
You wonder, is there even a comparison
Yeah.
between, how beautiful an angel is and just regular human women?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that we're talking about two different types of beings. I think angels in their physical manifestation, they manifest physically in order to interact with us. What they are in the spiritual realm is a different thing. So I think we'd be comparing apples with oranges. But I think for a fact what the text tells us is that they saw that the daughters of men were attractive. That word is tov. And at some point, it's the same word when God saw what He created. He saw it was good. It's the same thing that when Eve looked at the fruit, she saw it was good for tov. And so there are some verbal links, which I will try to show later. I think the point of that is not to say that, boy, the angels never look good and the women them look nice. I think the point of that is to connect what God sees as good with what women and man see as good and with what the angels see as good. Basically what's going on is they're going their own way. God sees something as good, and they're saying we see something different. That's the idea of like the kings doing what was evil in God's sight. But they're also doing what is good in their eyes. And so what it's connoting is a rebellion against God. So first we have Eve. She's rebelling against God here on earth. And then we have the angels. They're rebelling against God from heaven coming down. And then we're going to see, I have a slide later, I'll show you this, what the effect of what we think is good is on the world and why God has to bring the flood. So I think that's the point of when it says attractive, the actual word is good, tov. And I think the connections are between Eve and them and God. And it's pointing to their rebellion.
Just perspective from their point.
Yes, is what we see as good. And that's what sin is. God said, don't do this. But we do it because it looks good to us. And then all hell breaks loose. I think that is the point. Yes, Lydia.
This was from before, but
yes.
The scripture that says, without faith,
Yes.
it is impossible to please
Yes.
God. And what is in my heart, brother, is that some of the scripture, all right, the Bible says faith comes from hearing the message, right? So some of the Bible we don't understand. And when we read it, we don't really understand what it is saying. So therefore, how does that affect our faith in order to please God if we don't know? You understand what I'm
Right,
saying?
yeah. So I think the Bible is, the way I put it, it's not a flat book. Everything is not equally understandable. There's some things that are harder to understand than others. And not everything is of equal importance. It's all important, but some are more important than others. Certain things are core. Who is this God we're serving? What is sin? We must love each other. We must have faith in Jesus. Those things we must get. And those things, I think, are fairly clear. Everybody can get. But then you have these concentric circles that go out further. And some of the things, the wider out you go, you can get to heaven without getting it right or without understanding it. And so that's okay. What we've got to do is focus on the core. But all of us have got to be continually trying to do our best to understand, because God deals with us where we're at. Some of us, God expects for us to try harder because we've had more opportunities. And some of us, some people who can't read, that's okay. God will meet them exactly where they are. Nothing barred for them getting to heaven. But the point is, all of us have got to love God with all of our mind. What that looks like is different for all of us. But there's no room for lazy-mindedness. We must spend more time thinking about the Bible and less time on Netflix. I believe in Netflix. I watch some of it. But you know what? Some of us, man, that's all we do. I'm preaching here. I should stop. Yeah, okay. I saw your hand. And then Catherine, did you have your hand up for a question previously? Are you good? All right, yeah. Yes, go ahead, please.
I was thinking in relation to the discussion that the verse goes on
Yes.
to kind of like address it. When it talks about faith, the first part of the verse, and then it says it is believing in God or believing that God is,
Yes.
and that He is a rewarder. So I feel like that kind of like encapsulates what the faith in the earlier part of the verse is referring to.
Yeah.
And if you want to view that as core, I think that would be like a good basis on which to view that as core. But I have, I guess, two questions about rebellion. You mentioned cosmic rebellion, it was
Yeah.
in the slides. By cosmic, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And then the other thing about rebellion is you refer to what the angels did with the woman, let's say, as a rebellion. Is this a second rebellion? That is a rebellion different from the initial rebellion of how we could come to have the serpent in the garden?
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. So by cosmic, I mean this is a rebellion that is not just limited to earth or to heaven. It's cosmos is the whole ordered world. So this is, when he says cosmic, no, it's spread everywhere. Because what you have is a rebellion that involves actors from both in heaven and on earth. So both realms, heaven and earth, are conspiring to rebel against God. That's what's going on here. We have seed of the snake down here, and we have angels who are in rebellion up here. Your next question about whether it's a second rebellion, lots of people have wondered about that, and there's lots of Jewish writings that try to figure out what happened. How come you have angels in rebellion? And that takes us back to the garden. Where did that snake come from? And why is he rebelling against God? The Bible does not tell us. It's murky. And I think it's murky because we don't need to know. It's okay to talk about it and to think about it. I think the point is, at the end of the day, what we are aware of is certainly Satan was in rebellion in that garden. And some people speculate to think, well, that means he brought some other angels with him, and so now they're doing this move. I don't know exactly how it plays out. But what I do know, what the Bible clearly tells us is we have a spiritual being in the garden in the form of the snake who is leading Eve astray, and then we have these spiritual beings who are having sexual relations with women and rebelling against God, and God is dealing with them. So there's a lot in the background that we don't know, and we're curious. but we don't need to know everything. By the way, my mantra on some of that stuff is the less I know, the better. But we have different interests, and some of us can explore it. I will tell you that what you will find is that the Bible is not very clear on it, because God gives us what we know. But it's a good question. You picked up on the fact, really. All right, so these guys are rebelling. Was there something that happened before? Lots of people have asked that question, and there are different answers that are suggested. Ozzy, I'll take you last, and then we will get the coffee break so we can get some caffeine into our bodies.
So this is a request, Courtney. So
Yes.
similar to what Eddie was saying earlier about faith and
Yes.
pleasing God, I this week had a similar experience in my meditation, and I wanted you to do a lesson, probably, I don't know much in the future, on faith. They said, your faith is impossible to please God.
Yes.
And Methuselah pleased God. Jesus was very faithful because he says, everything I do please God in John. And when he talks to his disciples, he says, if you have this faith, mustard seed, you can move a mountain. So I'm looking at myself and says, how can I be like Methuselah, walk with God and please him?
Yes.
Yes.
You know what you mean.
Yes. And so I wanted to do a lesson on faith. What is this faith? Because it's all about pleasing God.
Yeah.
Abraham is the same. So in the future, we did a lesson on.
I got an assignment. Yeah.
Yes, I would love. Yes.
I think I'm
I'll do my own research, but I want it like for general.
I think I'm likely to do a lesson on Abraham in November, which will be about faith, because I think Abraham encapsulates what faith is about, and I think it looks different than we think. I think it has to do with trust and perseverance. Sometimes we think it is about believing big goals and accomplishing them. And I think it has a lot more to do with trusting God in the day-to-day of our life and persevering with God. But yes, faith is a big topic. I'll try and work that in the preaching agenda. Thank you.
You said patient to Courtney.
I must preach on patience as well. Is that what you said? Is that what you said, Pat? Or would it come with patience as well? Faith? Yeah, sure. I think one of the big ways that you've got to wait, faith involves waiting on God. Yeah. It involves a lot of waiting on God. And hopefully that's one of the things I'll talk about tomorrow. Faith is a lot of things. But I think we have to understand it for ourselves, ultimately. Because it's so critical to how we live the Christian life.